This episode of Recording Studio Rockstars is brought to you by Adam Audio, iZotope, Native Instruments, Lewitt, and Grace Design. You're hearing my voice right now on the Lewitt PureTube microphone through the Grace Design M201 Mark II mic pre mixed through iZotope, RX, Ozone, Neutron, and Nectar, all on Adam Audio monitors. Please check out our awesome sponsors using the link in the show notes below. It's a great way to help support this show, and there's some great deals waiting for you there. Now get ready to rock.
It was like 12 years ago, we were awarded this grant to do a songwriting retreat, and it went so well. We've had it re-upped every year for 12 years. So we go to this little island in Lake Winnipesaukee in New Hampshire the first week of June, where we're just off the grid. You have to take a boat out to this little island, but it has electricity and everything, so we're not like camping for a week, just focus on nothing but writing.
Welcome to Recording Studio Rockstars. I'm Lid Shaw, and this is the podcast created to help you become a rock star of the recording studio. Adam Audio's S-Series, crafted in Berlin, is a flagship line of reference monitors featuring 5 models from the compact S2V all the way up to the powerful S5H. The range builds on Adam Audio's iconic heritage with new technology for improved acoustic performance. With new woofers, redesigned waveguides, and a DSP engine, the S-Series ensures accurate frequency response, consistent dispersion, enhanced detail, and a forward-looking digital connectivity. Backed by a 5-year guarantee, Adam Audio monitors embody durability and professional sound for your studio at adamaudio.com. Are you recording your own music or other people's music in your studio, but you're having trouble figuring out how to get your mixes to sound great? Do they sound kind of weak or distant or lack punch and clarity? Well, I've got a gift to help you take your mixes from sounding like basement demos to sounding much closer to professional mixes. And it's my free course called Mix Master Bundle. This course will show you how to get pro-sounding mixes from your home studio with free and stock plugins in Pro Tools, and the best part is that these mixing techniques work for you in any DAW, whether you're on Logic, Cubase, Studio One, Reaper, anything you can think of. If you're ready now to make your best record ever, then go to mixmasterbundle.com to get started for free now, and you can find the clickable link in the show notes of this episode. Howdy Rockstars, it's your host, Lid Shaw, and welcome back to Recording Studio Rockstars, bringing you into the studio to learn from recording professionals so that you can make your best record ever and be a rock star of the studio yourself. My guest today is Dave Godowsky, a veteran of the music industry, having spent the past 20 plus years in management, A&R, and artist relations. On the label front, he served as director of A&R for Rounder Records, where he discovered and signed artists including Nathaniel, Rateliff, and Delta Spirit, which was actually a great band I got to record at Bonnaroo in my studio, and GM at Partisan Records, home to artists like Idols, Fontaines DC, and Deertick, another band that actually mixed their record. I think Providence was mixed at the Toy Box at my studio right here.
Oh, wow. And Friends of Delta Spirit.
Exactly. On the management front, he served as VP for Danny Goldberg at GoldVE, managing the careers of artists including Against Me, Okkervil River, another band that was in my Bonnaroo studio, Speedy Ortiz, and Cass McCombs. On the technology front, Dave handles all artist and industry relations for the pioneering audio tech innovator iZotope, which you're all very familiar with here, Rockstars, and now a Native Instruments and Plugin Alliance. A songwriter and producer himself, Dave has released 3 records and co-written, collaborated with many others, including Adam Duritz of Counting Crows, Lianne LaHavas, and Gene Ween of the band Ween, which is also another aside because I literally just had Ween up on my computer screen meeting with somebody just the other day. We were talking about 4-track records. He has toured nationwide, including performances at major festivals and on The Late Show with David Letterman. That's cool. Dave was named one of Billboard's 30 Under 30 and has been profiled by the Boston Globe for his industry and musical contributions. He currently lives with his wife and son in Portland, Maine. And that's a very cool place, Rockstars. If you're not familiar with it, it's also home to Gateway Sound, Bob Ludwig's studio, or was, I think, at this point. So please welcome Dave Godowsky to Recording Studio Rockstars. Dave, my friend, are you ready to rock?
I was born ready.
Even if you rock gently.
Yeah. I'm a gentle rocker.
A gentle rocker. There are gentle men and gentle women and gentle rockers.
Mm-hmm.
Tell us a little bit about your background. So, I mean, I was, obviously reading from your bio there, and you've done a lot of cool things. I've known you for a while. We might even want to start with our introduction, which was a fun topic, but it's cool to discover, all these other parts of your career that I didn't know anything about that you've done. How did you get, interested in music? What's the short story arc from getting interested in music to where you are today?
So first interest in music was just really, really early on. Just like my earliest memories in life are just sitting in front of my parents' record player, listening to all their stuff, Neil Young, Allman Brothers, the Monkees, just whatever was in their record collection. And the fascination was with the songs and the music and where this stuff came from, but also like just the idea of like dropping a needle on the record and suddenly all this music comes booming out of these big speakers. It was just fun. It was like this, world to disappear into. And then sitting at the piano and realizing, oh, if I push these keys, it sounds good. And just making up little songs and really just kind of an obsession with music and songwriting all the way through till I left school and graduated from college and said, I'm going to be a songwriter, musician, come hell or high water. Like, that's who I am. That's what I do. I don't care about anything else. That's all I'm ever going to do.
And was this up near Boston where you were growing up?
Yeah. I was in Maine, and then I went to school in Connecticut, and then moved to Boston, and between Boston and New York to pursue music, and lasted about 4 months.
Where'd you go to school in Connecticut? This
is not going to work.
Where'd you end up in Connecticut?
It was Connecticut College in New London.
Oh, yeah. You know what? I did a record for the poet laureate of Connecticut, Leo Connellan, who's a Mainer. That's somebody you need to know about. And he was the poet laureate at Connecticut College, as I recall.
Wow. And it's my son's name.
Oh, wow, man. This is getting too close to home.
It's meant to be.
So it's, let me, if you don't mind, let me interject a couple of things. You commented on 2 things. One is you talked about playing records and getting familiar with music and coming out of the big speakers. And we take that for granted, but it's a reminder, like, back then, like, the stereo was all these component stereo parts. It was really fun. You had to be kind of an audio engineer just to put a stereo together.
Right. There were big buttons and wires and things that, especially when you're a kid, it's like you're in a rocket ship or something. Yeah. It had that kind of feel to it.
Yeah. And then playing the piano part, I mean, this just popped into my head, but when you talked about playing notes and thinking that sounds good, that in itself is a really interesting concept, because obviously every note sounds good on the piano, but as a kid, how do we even know what we think sounds good? Like that speaks to the whole topic of familiarizing ourselves with Western music and 12-note scales and, contemporary tunings and all that. It's kind of fascinating.
Yeah. For me, it was like, what notes sound good together? Like, now I know I was thinking about harmony, but at the time it's just what buttons on the piano sound good when you play them at the same time. And I remember just thinking of it as pictures. Like the one thing that stands out in my head, I was probably like 5 years old or something, but I remember playing C and E at the same time. And I remember I thought it looked like a lion. I can't remember why. I mean, I was really young, but
it was like synesthesia or something.
Yeah, like it looked like a lion. So it was like, oh, if you do the one that looks like a lion, it sounds good. And like they all had little pictures in my mind of what sounds good. And so I'd play the lion notes and these notes. And then, eventually realize, oh, those are notes and here's why they sound good and everything.
Oh, that's so funny. I love that idea. I used to have visions of things like that when I was little. I'd try and go to bed and I'd hear this noise in my pillow. And I always imagined there was a kangaroo in my pillow. And it wasn't until later I realized I was just hearing my pulse. And I probably had good hearing at that point too.
Yeah, that's funny.
Okay, so you went down to so like you had this idea that you wanted to do the music thing. What were some of the first moves for you related to that? I mean, did you decide I'm going to be an artist professionally, or did you think I love doing music, I got to go get a job waiting tables?
It was definitely like, I'm going to be an artist. I am an artist in my, teenage brain. And then after college, it lasted like 4 months or something. Like, the reality sunk in of like bills and things. And I actually remember I was living on my friend's floor in Boston on a blow up mattress, and I had $400 in my bank account. And
that's
I remember
a lot back then.
Yeah. It was like, that was my nest egg and I got to make that last until I find a job and can figure out how to do all this. And I remember because at the time things were a little different with cell phones. And I had my first cell phone. This was probably like 2002 or something. And I didn't really know how they worked. And, back then it was like you pay for minutes. And so I wasn't keeping track of minutes or whatever. So I got I think it was Singular Wireless was the company. So I got my first bill in the mail, and I was just using the phone all the time. And it was like, because I remember the bill came to $400. And that was exactly how much I had in my account.
And then you had to decide, do I eat or do I make the phone company happy?
Right. Well, I think that was the point where I realized I need to really figure out what I'm doing for a job for money. Like I can't just write songs and play them.
So did you double down on, getting some other kind of job, or did you double down on how do I make money in music at that point?
Oh, it was just any job I could find. I just went around, any place that would take me to say, I worked at a hospital doing like filing paperwork. I worked at a hot dog stand. I worked at a teddy bear factory. I worked at a shoe store. I worked at a candy store. I worked at all these places, any place I could find a job. And for some reason, they would always end with leaving for bizarre reasons. But then I somehow got a job working at the Red Sox TV station, Nesson.
Oh, interesting. Which
was in Fenway Park. And so that was like the best thing ever, because I was just like an intern or something. And I would bring in a little bag lunch, and every day I would eat my lunch in, like there was a door, you walk out and you're suddenly, I could like eat like on the dugout, on the Red Sox dugout.
Yeah. And I bet
that was awesome.
Also introduced you to like the professional world of broadcasting and music. I mean, and the way those things are related.
Yeah, a little bit. I mean, mostly I was just doing grunt work, like filing stuff and whatever. And, but I remember my sister emailing me and saying, hey, I just saw a job. Someone told me there was a job at this record label and you should check it out. And it was at Rounder Records. So that was like my first, I just kind of blindly went in. And that was also sort of like an internship type thing, or,
Does Rounder still exist as a label now?
Yeah, it was bought by Concord a while ago, 10 or 15 years ago, but it's still a subsidiary of Concord.
Hey, Rockstar, come on over here. I've got a secret to tell you. Want to know how I get a consistent sound mixing over 1,000 hours of recording studio rock stars? Well, my secret is using iZotope, RX, Ozone, Neutron, and Nectar to make this podcast sound great. Right now, you are hearing RX breath control, declick, declip, DS, deplosive, voice denoise, ozone multiband compression, neutron EQ, and limiting, all from iZotope. Use the secret code ROCK10 to get 10% off over at iZotope.com. So tell us a little bit about that, because for the rock stars who don't know, I mean, Rounder is a really important record label. They brought a lot of, they brought a lot of really meaningful records to our discographies. That's the way I think about it. I think about, these huge labels that bring the K-Tel albums, and then these cool labels that bring the independent artists or the real hardcore songwriters or just the cool bands. What were some of your favorite artists that came from Rounder Records?
Oh my God, there were so many. So many, because they were known, probably best known for Alison Krauss. They were the first label. They were the ones who kind of discovered her and everything. But and then as I basically just was able to work my way up and within Rounder, and I kind of have them to thank for having any career in music at all, and ended up working my way up to being their director of A&R.
Wow.
And doing that, I got to do all kinds of cool stuff. But part of it was mining the catalog. So I would put together like a new John Fahey greatest hits compilation or a Loudon Wainwright compilation. I got to work with the Alan Lomax catalog, which was 100 titles of field recordings from decades and decades all over the world.
Those the Lomax recordings are incredible stuff.
Yeah, it's really cool. I mean, they were literally like, cool. He discovered Muddy Waters. It was like literally going all over the world with a Marantz recorder and recording musicians who had never heard themselves recorded before. And if it wasn't for him, this music wouldn't have migrated all over the planet. So,
wow. So Marantz that's an old school brand that was making tape machines. Was that even before Ampex, do you think? Or was that about
I think
the
it
same
was
time, like earliest kind of stuff?
Yeah, this was in like the 40s, I think.
Wow.
40s and 50s.
That name went back so far too.
Yeah, I think they were like the sort of category leader in the like handheld, little field recorder unit with a microphone.
Yeah, I think about those things. Well, I think about some of the Ampex ones, and they're they're pretty big with tubes in them and stuff like that, which that must have been as well.
Yeah. I love those. I actually just bought the Warm Audio emulation of the Ampex tube mic pre's.
Oh, cool.
I haven't even used it yet. I just got it. But they have something that supposedly it's really good. And other people who know things told me, so I believe them.
What's a favorite mic for you? What's the first mic you're going to plug into that and test it out?
I really love everything from there's so many. I love Earthworks. Earthworks just has like there's just something about all their mics that are amazing. I love Soyuz.
Earthworks is right up there. They're in New Hampshire.
Yeah. It's great. They're great people. They make great stuff. It's all done right there on this river in New Hampshire. It's really cool. Soyuz mics are amazing. Warm Audio makes really good.
Are those all mics
stuff
that you have in your own collection that you're going to try out?
Yeah. Yep. Those are like three. I love a C414
Well, it's interesting
M160.
because you almost listed a bunch of condenser mics, and ironically, like the mic that would have first been paired with a Ampex was probably a dynamic or a ribbon, wasn't it?
Yeah, it's probably true.
They probably didn't
I don't
have
know how that
phantom power on those back then.
Yeah.
Well, very cool. So what were some artists that you got to work with at Rounder that got you excited? And it's interesting to hear you talk about re-releasing things. You must have learned a ton about the business side of music and what makes the bills get paid, or where the challenges are in paying bills from that experience.
Yeah. That's really the only way to do it. Like anything, I guess, is just to actually get your feet wet and really do it, and kind of, especially working your way up. Sorry about the pop.
Oh, it's all right. Here, I'll drop a marker right there, but we can, just watch out. If you get a little wind on that, it does seem to want to peep up.
Yeah. Working your way up from the bottom is such a great way to learn any business, because I started basically as an intern. So just was able to see, how everything really functions at every level. But in terms of the artists I got to work with, I mean, of course, there was the stuff like Jonathan Richman and Loudon Wainwright. And
I totally
John
had Jonathan
Fahey.
Richman listed in my questions for you too.
Oh, wow.
And that was from listening to your music.
Oh, really?
I was going to ask
Interesting.
If you were a fan. Yeah.
Wow. I mean, I actually never worked with him like as a person. I just got to work with his catalog. A lot of his back catalog was on Rounder. So a lot of the stuff was that. But in terms of, working with artists as an A&R person, like in the conventional sense, like discovering talent and helping build their career and all that. There were a bunch. I mean, the one that's probably the most well-known is Nathaniel Rateliff.
Mm-hmm.
I remember when he first was coming up, it was sort of like, I had the room in our schedule to sign one artist, and it was between him and Mumford & Sons. And I remember hearing the Mumford & Sons music and just, I just thought Nathaniel was just a better songwriter. I just, like it has to come down to something. And ultimately I was like, I have to go with my gut. I feel like Nathaniel is just a more talented writer.
And you were faced with a choice. You couldn't just sign two artists at that point.
Yeah, unfortunately not. So for many years, a lot of people would give me a hard time about that because Mumford & Sons went on to become this huge, huge mega success. And Nathaniel at the time was still playing for like 5 people a night. And he would be like sleeping on my couch and stuff, But that's just what made it all the more sweet when he finally broke out. And, now he's selling out multiple nights at Red Rocks and he's, a musical guest on SNL and all these huge things. So it's very satisfying when it works out like that. He definitely paid his dues.
Yeah, that's cool. I mean, music is a funny thing because it is obviously associated with the business side of what it is. And that can be legitimate to pursue that because there's certainly a lot of music business that functions that way, but it can also be a distraction. And, there's something just really fundamental about just trusting your own artistic intuition and how it relates to music. And it's what's encouraging is when you do that, whether you're making the music yourself or helping somebody else make music or, doing PR for them or whatever, it can really, I find it can really drive you. You can go 10 miles when you believe in something where if you didn't believe it in the same way, you might have been able to go 1 mile with it,
Totally. Also, if that's not how you're working, then like, what are you doing? That's sort of, I mean, at least for me, I was like, it's like, what are you doing? Like for people who are not working out of a place of belief and passion and heart around the artists they're working with and just the work they're doing, then it doesn't really matter that they're in music. They could be in any industry, you know. So yeah, it's essential. It's also, if you're trying to do anything really great, you know, it's always going to have to, you're going to have some risk, and there's going to have to be the element of just belief involved somehow.
Yeah. Yeah, agreed. And that's cool to hear those stories. So then what about some of the other artists? Like, where did you go from Rounder? How long were you there?
So, well, initially when I started off, I ended up leaving for a while to manage a band called Clap Your Hands, Say Yeah.
Oh yeah.
And it turned into a huge success. Kind of, we kind of stumbled into success. We were all college friends, and we were all kind of in different bands together and friends and played together and stuff. And I remember just saying like, "Hey, you guys are really good. Why don't I be your manager?" And they were kind of like, "Okay, like what does a manager do?" I'm like, "I don't know, whatever. We'll figure it out. I'll be the manager." Okay, cool. Yeah. I mean, it was sort of like the most informal thing ever. And then the next thing you know, they were like the biggest indie rock band in the world. In like 2004, 2005, there were articles in like Wall Street Journal and Time Magazine and the New York Times and all these places that were like, this band has unlocked the secret to the future of the music industry. Because at the time, we were doing it without a record label. And, you know, it's not a big deal now, but back
Clap
then,
Your Hands and Say Yeah was a two-member band, right? Or no? Am I remembering that wrong?
No, it was there was one lead singer, and but it was like a 5-piece band.
Oh, okay.
But yeah, it was the kind of the first band that took like music blogs and Pitchfork, that path to success.
Yeah.
Without a record label or anything. And you know, it was just a completely different industry back then, because the thing everyone was talking about was like they sold, you know, whatever, it was 70,000 CDs or 100,000 CDs without a record label. You know, the album had an end cap at Virgin, you know, stuff like that. Like,
yeah,
that doesn't exist anymore. So, but at the time it was a big deal. And everyone was acting like, you know, we had this secret formula to the future of the music industry, when in reality, we were just kind of making it up and figuring it out as we went along. So yeah, right place at the right time, I guess.
Wow. No, I think I was thinking of the Yeah, Yeah, Yeahs. That's what makes me up there. But
yeah,
well, that's a same what?
It was same era.
Same era. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Well, very cool. So then how about, so then you did the management, and that was a part of your career that really introduced you to a lot of artists, and you sort of grew your understanding of interacting with the artists themselves. Is that what led you to what you're doing now with iZotope Native Instruments and Plugin Alliance in artist relations?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, so I did like 15 years of management and A&R. Sometimes it was both at the same time. Sometimes it was one or the other. I managed with either on my own or part of different companies doing A&R for different labels. And after like 15 years of it, I kind of just got burnt out. It's like, it's kind of a grueling job. And yeah, it just, I don't know. I just sort of felt like I wanted to change, but I didn't want to leave music or anything. I just wanted to do something else. And actually, the guy who plays drums in Clap Your Hands, Say Yeah, or used to play drums in Clap Your Hands, Say Yeah, Sean Greenhall, was obviously a dear friend of mine, and he had left the band to go work at iZotope. And he was working there, and he hit me up one day like, "Hey, do you know, we need someone to do artist relations. Do you know anyone who would be good at that? Do you have any like contacts?" And like the wheels were turning in my head, and I was like, what if I did it? I feel like I would be good at that. And that That was like 2017. And that's how this current career all started.
That's pretty close to when I met you. I probably met you around 2017 or 18, I think. And I remember I was at the AES conference in New York, and I was going around checking out all the different booths and everything. And I went by the iZotope booth, and I knew already, I was like, I need to connect with these guys, and I need to let them know how incredibly useful Ozone and RX and everything is for doing podcasts. Because I had long been using iZotope to make sure that, some of these incredibly difficult recordings sounded fantastic by the time I was done with it. And so I went up and I met you, and you guys were doing a few different things, but you at that point were showing off. I hope it's okay for me to bring it up. But you were showing off a cool new app and little recording device called Spire Studio. And you showed me this app, and you did a little demo for me. And you said like, oh, you can record an idea here, and then you can text it to a friend, and then they can continue recording. And I was like, wait a minute, holy shit, you can just like collaborate with people with this little app.
Yeah.
And that was super cool. And then the funny aside was, then we discovered right after that you were already playing guitar with my cousin Jennifer Kimball in Boston too. And I was like, okay.
Yeah.
That was a connection that was meant to be.
Yeah. And the universe is doing its thing once again, because I'm playing a gig with Jennifer in 2 days. Well, 2 days from when this is being recorded, not 2 days from when
it comes out, right?
To it.
So this will be a twist. Is that like past, future, perfect, past tense or something like that? I don't really know. One of those.
Oh yeah. I hope the gig went well.
I hope the gig went well. Awesome, dude. Well, so now you've been at iZotope for a while. One of the cool things about the Boston area that always struck me is a little bit, sometimes feeling unfairly, is, having moved to Nashville, having spent most of my life down here, having gotten into music, having started a podcast, and then interviewing people, I sort of discovered, I was like, oh, you know what? There was like music was there all along in Boston happening. I just didn't know it at the time. Have you found that Boston is a pretty great, well, I know you're in Maine now, but just that New England area, there's a ton of stuff and a ton of history in music and recording that goes on, that has gone on and still goes on up there.
Yeah, I think it's a great scene. I love the music scene in New England. It sort of mirrors a sort of cultural vibe around here. There's a lot of respect and reverence for some really fundamental things in music that might be lost in other places. I guess it depends what genre you're in and what circles you're running in.
Yeah. But
yeah, I like it. It's always felt welcoming to me, which I appreciate. And yeah, it's weird. The whole idea of your geographic location and how it affects your career and everything has obviously changed a lot over the years.
Yeah. The whole music industry just shifts underneath our feet.
Yes.
That's a thing. Even hearing you describe doing management for 15 years, I think it's a good thing to remember that the music industry changes so much all the time that it's like at any point that you sign up for some part of it, just know that it's going to shift right under your feet. And 10 or 15 years later, you'll be like, okay, what should I do now?
Yeah, absolutely. And that it's a good thing, like people tend to look at the most recent decade or even like the last 20, 30, 40 years, whatever, as like the way things should be always, as opposed to the way things currently are in this slice of history. Because if you take a step back and look at the grand scheme of things, it wasn't that long ago that music was something that was commissioned by kings or, compositions that were made for the church. Or, it wasn't until the 1920s that people could first even listen to music at home. Like the idea of listening to music in the privacy of your own home wasn't that long ago. That's like one person's life ago. like it's a relatively modern thing. And like even more modern is the idea of an album, like people writing their own songs and making an album that you could sell and promote. So when there's people talking about, massive changes to music and how things are different now than they were 10 years ago or 5 years ago, it's kind of like, well, yeah, like what did you expect? It's going to keep doing that forever. That's just life.
Look, if you're like me, then you love having cool instruments in your studio, right? No matter what style of music you make, Native Instruments gives your studio all the instruments and sounds you need, from drums, loops, and beats to the coolest synthesizers, realistic strings, guitar amps, and futuristic synth pads. I love recording and tracking real bands in my studio, but then adding awesome overdubs from Contact, Massive X, Super 8, Battery, Guitar Rig, and Hybrid Keys, for example. Use the code ROCK10 now to get 10% off, or get Complete Start for free today with a bundle of 2,000 sounds and 6 gigs of samples, all over at nativeinstruments.com. Yeah, it's funny you talk about 1920 and listening to music in your own home. My family also was in Maine, and my great-grandfather built a house up in on the edge of Acadia National Park in Seal Harbor, Maine, that was in our family. We actually now that I'm one of many cousins, it finally has moved on to new owners. But it was in our family for over 100 years. And as we were selling the house and like bringing personal things back, claiming them for different family members, I immediately was like, I want the Victrola. So there was an old Victrola that was always up on the third floor of the house, and my great-grandfather bought it in 1907. It just been sitting there. One record player just sat in that house, and as kids, we'd grow up and find these old 78s. And, I think we had long since run out of needles to play them, so we'd figure out clever things. Like at one point I wound up a record and I realized it's like, if you take a playing card, because of course there were playing cards in the house, no needles for the records, but there were plenty of cards because what else are you going to do on hanging out in the summer with your family? But if you take the corner of a playing card and gently like set it down in the groove of a record, you can hear the record playing off the body of the playing card.
Oh, cool. That's amazing. Yeah, there's something about that. It's sort of like getting back to what we were talking about before with like when you're a kid exploring like the physical aspects of music and listening to records and things, exploring that. Like it's more than just like, whose song am I hearing and skipping to the next one. It's like, it's more of a tactile kind of universe that you're exploring.
Yeah, that's what I love about playing real instruments too. An acoustic guitar, just picking it up and playing it, you can just sit there and pluck one note for a long time and explore like all the different ways to play it. And they have these massively different sounds. And then, one day you're sitting there playing guitar very quietly in a quiet space, and you discover like there's a whole world of sounds at that lower volume versus like banging out chords and like a totally different sort of environment.
Totally. And like the overtones you hear on a guitar when you let it ring out, fretted at certain points. And I mean, there's things that we hear that I don't even think we're aware of. And even just the fact that, it's creating vibrations that are then, vibrate your eardrums in such a way that you can kind of decode it. The same is true for speech or anything, that it's a physical relationship. So that differentiates itself from so many other art forms. If you're reading a book, you need to look at the words and then in your head decide what those symbols on the page mean, and then think about what that means to you. Or if you're looking at a painting or anything like that. But with music, it's physically affecting your eardrum. It's a physical experience. It has more in common with like tasting food or something. So I think it makes sense that physical instruments and And, real life experiences are so deeply affecting to us because it's kind of coded into our DNA from thousands of years.
Yeah, it's cool to hear you talk about, the process of sort of sampling the world with your senses, whether it's what things sound like, what they feel like, lyrics. I know lyrics are important to you too. What do you find is a good process for you personally about holding on to those, those little sensory samples of things around you so that you can compose them into song later, so that you can record them into a record? Have you found that there's a routine, like there's a sketch moment or a notebook moment versus a hit the studio and record the song moment?
Yeah, definitely. For me, it's always the same. There's like a whole process that, for better or worse, it's just how I work, which is, I just, the best analogy I can use is like harvesting seeds. And like these little, I'm constantly harvesting seeds and squirreling them away on a notepad or a voice memo. And most of them are bad. Like, most of them don't turn into anything, but they're just little ideas. It could be a melody, it could be a lyric, it could be a concept for how to think about writing a song. It could just be anything, and I'll just jot it down. Usually it's a voice memo. I'll be driving and I'll just capture it. And then what I do is the first week of June, and this is where it gets very specific. The first week of June every year, I'm fortunate enough to be part of a group of people who go on a grant-funded songwriting retreat.
Amazing.
And there's a grant that's part of Club Passim in Cambridge, and they allot funds to different Boston/New England musicians. And this group of us, it was like 12 years ago, we were awarded this grant to do a songwriting retreat. And it went so well that we've had it re-upped every year for 12 years. So we go to this little island in Lake Winnipesaukee in New Hampshire the first week of June, where we're just off the grid. You have to take a boat out to this little island, but it has electricity and everything. So we're not like camping. But you're definitely off the grid. And for a week, just focus on nothing but writing. And that's where I take out all the old notepads and voice memos and just spend the first couple of days sifting through all this stuff and seeing if there's anything good in there. And, most of the time I'm like, what was I thinking with this? This is like really bad. But then every now and then I'm like, ooh, it's like I'm hearing someone else's. It's like a split personality.
Yeah.
And I'm hearing someone else pitching me ideas. And suddenly I'm like, oh, that's really good. And then it's like I'm collaborating with my former self.
That's great. I love that concept. And that really rings true for me. I've found that, so working with my close friend, Chris King, who has long been practicing something like that, jotting down ideas. We would always call it gig booking, because there would always be a notebook as we were touring and gigging, and a good saying or an expression or some story would just go into the gig book. So, I learned a little bit about that from him, and this concept of almost separating in time the seed of an idea from revisiting it, kind of like finishing a record. Like you don't really know what you think about the record until like 6 months later and you listen to it fresh again and you've forgotten all the internal, oh, I need to fix the bass, I need to fix the drums here, kind of stuff. And you just hear it. It's interesting to think about that creative experience in the same way, where it's like you need to separate yourself from it so that you see it as a new idea. Because think about like when we listen to other people's records, you listen to a cool artist and you're like, God, how did they do that? It's so cool. They just sound like a rock star, or they sound like so convincing, and you're immediately sold on it, or you're not, or you think they suck, one of the two. But, trying to find a way to do that in your own creative experience is a cool concept, and it makes a lot of sense. And I used to, I'll shut up in a moment, but I used to record students in local schools here doing, poets would go into the school and they would teach the kids how to write poetry, and they'd write a piece and then they'd perform it in a poetry slam, but they'd also have me come in and set up a studio and record these kids presenting their poems onto a microphone. And it was one of the things I instinctively learned to coach them on, which imagine that somebody handed this to you and you didn't write it and it was a script, and now you're an actor on a stage and you just have to bring it to life for a movie. And so that what you said just reminds me of that, and how powerful an idea that is.
Right. Yeah, that makes sense. It's sort of like thinking of it as interpreting the words instead of just reciting them. And also for me, I mean, I don't know if it's true for other people, but for me, I don't really know if an idea is good or not until it's had some time to live and breathe a little bit. So that it's like planting the seeds and seeing which ones come up. Because most of them, when you plant them, you think, oh, this is going to blossom into something amazing. And most of them don't. So, because again, this is just me. Sometimes in my head, I'll be like, oh, this is amazing. And then when I revisit it, it's like, I don't know what kind of mood I was in, but it's kind of like when you wake up in the middle of the night and scribble down some thought or something. And then the next day you're like, what? That doesn't make any sense. At the time, it made sense. So, I don't want to, it's like, you don't want to plant your bad seeds or whatever. I don't want to come up with a bunch of ideas and immediately go all in with them, because they might not actually be that good. So I kind of like the idea of letting them all gestate for a while.
Yeah, so many questions come to mind. Like one question is, when do you trust your listening self? When is your listening self even a voice worth listening to?
Yeah, I mean, that's at some point you just got to go with it, because you could easily take the same philosophy too far and it could backfire, because you don't want to overcook everything or overthink everything, because someone could definitely have, say, well, most great things happen kind of spontaneously, and you want to harness the magic and capture lightning in a bottle, and you don't want to overly try to manufacture everything. And that's definitely true too, but I think that's true more in the recording process, as opposed to writing. I wouldn't want to spend 3 years recording a song necessarily, although some people do, but for me, that would probably be a really bad thing. But I could spend 3 years writing something. And then as long as when I go in the studio, I'm open-minded to let it go wherever it wants to go.
Yeah.
And sort of harness that lightning in a bottle, spontaneity, magic moment in terms of the arrangement and the production and kind of where you take the song. But the actual writing of the song, I don't think is as contingent on spontaneity.
So interesting to hear about this going to an island to write. It sounds amazing. Sounds like a totally amazing experience. And I know for myself, when I travel, I just sort of get out of my own, being at home can be, there are many things that accompany being at home. So being at home is wonderful. Having a home studio is wonderful. But with that comes an accompaniment of home equals many other things as well. It might equal got to pay bills. It might equal, got to get dinner ready. It might equal family stuff that's both positive and challenging or whatever, And traveling can open that up in interesting ways, because it's just frees you.
Definitely.
What about, is there something about your experience on an island looking at these songs that you find makes it easier to find something you appreciate about it? But are there also things where you're like, I'm having trouble connecting with something? I mean, it's like if you look out your window and you see a pine cone on a tree, are all your songs about pine cones?
No, although I have noticed that everyone who goes to the island, I keep noticing little references spark up here and there around like water and things like, but I think the reality is you could probably find lots of different common threads. It's just, you find what it is you're looking for sometimes. But yeah, mostly it's not anything literal with the surroundings. It's more just having that peace of mind of being able to get into a headspace where you allow the song to be written.
Yeah,
because if you're trying to get that inspirational moment, I think most songwriters would agree their best songs happen as a moment of inspiration. It's hard to tell exactly how it happened. It just sort of happens. You're in the right headspace. And so it's not about trying to write a song so much as trying to get in the right headspace to allow the song to happen. It's like the song wants to happen and people kind of get in the song's way by overthinking it. You put it under a microscope or try to manufacture the process or overly formalize it, and it doesn't happen. So, but it can be hard to get into that space. If it were easy, then everyone would constantly be writing hit songs. So like it's hard to get into that zone. And for me, going to this island is almost like a magical thing. It's like the minute I step foot there, it's amazing. It's like I suddenly, the songs just start coming. And every year I think it's dried up. The well has dried up. I'm grateful for all the years I've been able to write all these songs I'm really proud of. But maybe this is the year it's finally stuck. But every year it's like clockwork. For some reason, I go into this place and all of a sudden these songs come. So yeah, it's just a testament to being in the right state of mind, I think.
That's so cool. The S Series by Adam Audio, crafted in Berlin, is a flagship line of reference monitors, blending advanced engineering and in-house design. With 5 models in various sizes and configurations, these monitors build on Adam Audio's iconic heritage while incorporating new technology for improved acoustic performance. The range includes the compact S2V with the 7-inch woofer, the 3-way S3H with twin 7-inch woofers, the vertical S3V with a single 9-inch woofer, and the powerful S5H and S5V main monitors featuring a 12-inch woofer and exceeding 131 dBSPL per pair. Despite differences in size and power, all these models provide highly analytical sound for professional audio applications. The S Series includes new woofers, mid-range drivers, redesigned waveguides, and a DSP engine for crossover optimization. The result is accurate frequency response, consistent dispersion, enhanced detail in bass and mid frequencies with wider frequency ranges, and forward-looking digital connectivity, all in a durable design. The S Series ensures longevity in your studio, backed with a 5-year guarantee at adamaudio.com. I am massively impressed with iZotope Ozone. I've been mastering a lot of my records recently, and Ozone makes it so easy for me to get a fantastic sound. The mastering assistant will help you get started by measuring your track and suggesting all the settings you need for a professional result based on the genre and EQ curve of your choice. You can even reference a specific song if you want, using simple yet sophisticated modules like clarity, impact, low-end focus, stabilizer, imager, exciter, and spectral shaping, along with powerful dynamic EQ, compression, and limiting. You simply adjust the settings to your own taste and it sounds incredible. And the magic of master rebalance means you can reach into your mix at the mastering stage and manipulate the vocal, bass, and drums. My bandmates are pretty demanding of my mixes, but now when I send off the masters for approval and get comments back like, "Holy bleep, pristine," damn good mastering, crystal clear. You're a wizard. Finally, I love my singing, and the drums and bass sound huge. Well, then I know I'm doing something right. So check out the newest Ozone, RX, and all the other great apps at iZotope.com and use the code ROCK10 to get 10% off. Hey, Rockstars, we're back now for the jam session, aka the second half of the show. My guest today is Dave Godowsky, joining us from his lovely writing space and home in Maine. And Dave, you ready to jam?
Yeah, let's do it. Let's improvise.
So I had a couple of comments on what you were just talking about before the break. I think there's a lot of stuff comes to mind for me because songwriting, I mean, I think all of us listening to the show, like we have a love for the tech side of what we do. We have a love for the recording side. It's obviously a podcast about the recording studio, but many, many of us listening also have an initial love just for making music and for writing songs and for wanting to, you know, be in a band and make records and everything. And then we sort of gravitate towards the engineering and producing side of things. So any topics about writing really hit home for me because, you know, at my core, that's what I love doing. And so like this, when you talk about the island and going there and how the songs start flowing, it reminds me that there is a lot to be said for the ways that we create our own repeated process, because it's kind of like there was that book, The War of Art, which talked about the importance of always going into the creative space and just setting time. This is my work time. Now I'm here to do this. And it trains us, you know, where it's like you go sit down to do the thing. And even if you don't feel like doing the thing, something switches in you and something gets done. And it might be good today. It might not be good today, but it gets done. And I imagine that for you, the going to the island has that quality.
The
routine of it, right? So like for me, it might be just setting a weekend aside and inviting my friends to come do a session. And I'm like, I don't know what the hell we're going to do, but we're going to do something, you know, and then having a process and then the result comes out and I'm, at least for a few days, I'm blown away by what we did. Maybe after 2 weeks, I'm like, all right, need some work, but still, you know, that process.
As long as the routine is done in an efficient environment, in an efficient way, in the right environment. You know, the other sort of cliche analogy, but it's a really good one, is just like fishing, you know, like you're fishing for songs. So if every day you wake up and you put a fishing line in the water with a hook with no bait on it, you're not going to catch anything. Or if you drop a worm into a puddle or something, you're not going to catch any fish. You know, it's sort of like, well, what are you doing to try to catch the fish? You know, like, are you using the right bait at the right time in the right place? Can you put multiple lines in the water? You know, you can extend the analogy as far as you want, but I think it makes sense, and I think it does have some value, because you think about, you know, I could sit down, if I just sit down with my guitar and start strumming the same chords over and over again in my living room or something, then like it sort of feels like dropping a worm into a puddle. Like, I don't think I'm going to catch anything there. It's just the same. I'm just going to do this. Your hands go to the same place. You kind of go to you keep going through the same motions. So it's sort of like, well, what can you do to try to stumble upon something interesting, or like, you know, instead of just going through the same motions. And sometimes it's not even about what you're playing. Sometimes it's about listening, you know, like go listen to something that really gets you inspired. You know, when you go to a show or you hear an album that's so good, it makes you just want to go write music. Because you hear it and you're like, oh my God, like maybe there's part of you that thinks, I feel like it wouldn't be crazy to imagine that I could have written that or something. You're like, you see some sort of light at the end of the tunnel in what that songwriter is doing. And it inspires you to go write. Like listen to a bunch of that music to get yourself in the right mood. And then, it's just like trying to.
That's really wise, because I get inspired by people I'm recording in the studio, or even just doing an interview. I listen to your records, which sound great, by the way. And Rockstars, we have a playlist in the show notes, so please go listen to Dave's discography. We've got a couple of his fantastic sounding records right there. You can just click through. But like beautiful sounding fingerpick guitars, and then some of the drum parts are just like so precise and like, kind of have that gated quality sometimes that just sounds really cool, and a real wide variety of stuff. But also picking up different instruments I find really helps inspire me. Just to give a shout out for a moment to Native Instruments. I got Complete 14 installed, and it's just this amazing collection of instruments that are so different for me. They're so different from picking up an acoustic guitar. They're these cool otherworldly sounds and stuff. And I found it like instantly inspiring as far as coming up with new cool ideas and stuff, and writing songs. And it's a fun way to do it. What are some of the things that you really enjoy picking up as far as like an alternate instrument? Do you ever let that guide your writing?
Yeah, definitely. Definitely. It's always good to do. I remember Sufjan Stevens once telling me an interesting sort of, he felt the same way about, he felt like he had exhausted the guitar, and I was giving him a bunch of, just kind of showing him around a bunch of different plugins and software instruments and stuff. And he was loving it. And I was trying to show him how to use something. And he was like, no, don't show me. I want to make as many mistakes as possible. He was like, I want to fumble around and explore it and make mistakes and all that. I thought it was really smart, because it's kind of like, that's how I think Sufjan intuitively knows that, where great songs come from, thing about lightning in a bottle and all that. And he knows that like the more the ins and outs of the product and everything, the less likely it is that you're going to stumble upon something kind of magic.
Yeah, that makes sense. I mean, just thinking about even playing guitar on something, if you already know what the song is and you already know what you're trying to play, you might mentally discard everything else that happens until you put down the chords played exactly the way you want.
Yeah.
But when you're just rolling the voice memo and you're just experimenting and searching, you stumble on all these things. I love going back and listening to a recording of a stumble that I'm like, well, that's it. There's a whole song in that one idea right there. Sometimes it's a real pain in the ass to figure out how you actually played it, though. Especially if you mess with alternate tunings.
Oh yeah. Like if you're Joni Mitchell or something, that must be a nightmare.
Yeah.
But for me, it's the same thing as you, really, with Contact and everything. And, I'm not just saying that because I work at the company, but I really do feel the same way where, lots of people feel that. It's just when you're going through Contact libraries and it just allows you to explore different sounds and instruments and completely different approaches that spark inspiration that you would never find living inside your guitar.
There's so much. Yeah. There's so much stuff that's so unexpected. I could start naming off some of the different. How do you guys describe it? So within Complete, you have these different sort of instrument packages you can install, and you can add more later and everything. Yeah, I guess they're just each one is called an instrument.
Yeah. And there's like different platforms. Complete is just the bundle. Complete is just like the big shopping bag of stuff. But like, Contact is a player.
Yeah.
And you can
it's been around for a long time too.
Yeah.
It's like an OG sample player.
Yeah. And the new, so Native Instruments is also just putting out all these new keyboards that I think are actually, in some ways it's a slight update from the previous one. In other ways, it's a massive update. It's sort of like sometimes these little tweaks can make a world of difference. Like on these new keyboards, it just has a big central screen on it.
I love it.
Where all the, the dials in the software instrument are mapped to physical knobs. So when you scroll through all these contact instruments, the minute you pull it up on the keyboard screen, it feels like that keyboard turns into that instrument. So you're like, wow, now I'm playing this, and now I'm playing that, and now I'm playing. That one little thing is enough to get you in the right headspace, in the right zone, and really make it feel like you're exploring a real instrument, and it taps into that part of your brain. And yeah, it's kind of a big deal for anyone who appreciates that workflow.
I definitely appreciate that. And I have the S61 in my studio now, and it has mine has two little screens that are side by side, and I think the newer version has, like you said, one larger screen, but I think it's the same concept. And what's so cool about it is that I can wheel it in front of where my mouse and keyboard are now. So I'm in the sweet spot of my speakers, but instead of having to reach up to the mouse to change, click and find a new sound, which I always found really jarring. So like my hands are on the keys and I'm thinking music, and then I have to take my hands off the keys and reach up for a mouse and like think computer and click on a thing on the screen to try a new one and come back. And that always felt too slow. And what's so cool about the S series is it allows you to just turn the knob and stay on the keyboard the whole time. I can look down at the keyboard and not have to look up at the computer. And
like it's a physical thing. It's like the physical act of recording and exploring music and getting creative while you're looking down with your hands on the keyboard. Because when you're looking up with your hand on the mouse or whatever, like that's the same physical position you're in when you're like checking Facebook or something, like doing your taxes or something. Like there's just some sort of muscle memory and association with that that's very different than making music. So yeah, allowing you to just look down at your instrument the whole time. It seems like a small thing, but it ends up being like a big deal.
Yeah, and then using knobs to change sounds, for example, or adjust things, it actually allows me to do things with my eyes a little bit closed if I want to. I mean, you think about playing guitar, and once you get in your comfort zone, it's really common to close your eyes and really just listen harder to what you're doing, And it's cool when something like a keyboard can transform the computer experience into more of that. That just the simple fact that I can turn a knob and it flips through the different presets, because that's one of the big, it can feel like a little bit of a hurdle as somebody who's entering the digital sound world. There's so many sounds that it's like, how can I just kind of flip through them quickly until I hear something that I dig? I think as you get more expert with it, you sort of assemble things into your own libraries and where to find some favorite sounds and everything. But initially, it's nice to just be able to go through and be like, ding, 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 no. Because in other words, when you're looking for a keyboard sound, especially if you're doing an overdub, there's more no's than yeses, right? So you want to get through all the no's until you get to a yes, and you're like, ooh, that's cool. And you guys designed it where you can just scroll through and I can do that without even looking up at the computer. And then when I find the one I like, hit a button, and now it's on the keys, and immediately the knobs are adjusting.
Right. Like auditioning all the sounds.
Yeah. It sounds so basic, but it's so key to the experience.
Yeah.
I
really like that experience too, with like instruments that are fictitious.
Right.
Like not just like, I'm going to pull up a harp or I'm going to pull up a B3 or, I mean, it's all cool too. But like, Native has this instrument called Playbox.
Yeah.
Which is like, it's just sort of like it generates creative ideas, but it's all tonal and it's musical. It's just grabbing different samples and filters and applying them to different notes and chords. And it's just done in a very elegant, thoughtful way. I find that to be a good marriage of like engineering and creativity, because it's that's oftentimes that's lost in the software world. A lot of the software and music production, they say they're making products for producers, but they're really making them for engineers. They're designed to perform a specific function and programmed that way and coded that way, which is great. But like we were saying before, when you're songwriting and being creative, it's not about saying, hey, I have a function I need to perform. What tool is going to efficiently perform that function? That's not really the headspace you're in. You're just trying to explore and stumble upon something cool. You're trying to get inspired. And oftentimes the products that these software companies are making, that's the last thing on their mind. They wouldn't even know what to do with that. But Playbox is a good exception to that because it really prioritizes that sort of thing.
Yeah. And then I think it has like randomizing kind of things too, where you can hit a button and it'll just give you a random result.
There's an actual dice. There's a die. So you actually like roll the die and it, it's kind of fun. That's the other thing, like having it be fun. Like Teenage Engineering does a great job with that, where you can tell that they actually take it seriously as a, part of their engineering and development, like making it fun.
Even the way they present their stuff was done with an attitude of fun. The first time I met them, I was walking into the NAMM event in California, and I hope nobody gets in trouble for this, but there was somebody parked in the parking lot in an SUV with the trunk wide open and cranking out tunes. And they had cleverly decided that, the best booth is the first thing you experience on your way into the event. And so there was a guy who just had all the little Teenage Engineering stuff out, and it was playing back stuff, and I went up and tried it out, and it was just really, I was like, okay,
that's great.
Cool.
Yeah, there is something kind of punk, kind of punk rock about them.
Punk rock.
And you want to use the stuff. Like that's the thing. Like I have an OP1, and whenever I use it, I actually want to use it. Even if there's things where I'm like, I need to learn how to use this or that, or I need to like get out the manual or go like, usually that experience is something I kind of dread. It's like, oh God, I got to do all this homework to learn this thing. I want to have fun with it. I want to make some music. I want to get inspired.
Yeah.
But they build the stuff in such a way that it's fun to use. It's sort of like taking the sort of playing with a toy aspect and just doing it in a really mature way.
I agree. And I do think it's probably, the combination of something that is just instantly fun so that you're inspired to want to do it, but that it has the ability to get in depth with it when you're ready to do that is probably the sweet spot. So for me, Contact is one of those ones where it was instant fun once loading in all the sounds. Then I'm like, oh, that's so cool. I'll listen to that. And I felt like if I wanted to, I could be instantly making a movie trailer soundtrack. It's got that kind of capability. And then the ones like Ashlight and, these ethereal, otherworldly kind of instruments are really exciting. And even the images they choose look really cool. Let's see, there was another one called Empire Breaks.
Yeah.
And what was it? I don't see the name right in front of me. Was it 40s drums? And I know there's 40s keys. There's these really cool ones that just have, like the sounds are just great right off the bat. So they inspire you to want to play cool beats. But then I also took the time, like you said, like where I'm like, okay, I really want to sit down and learn this. So I watched videos learning how to really get under the hood of Kontakt. And I just like one day I was like, all right, I'm going to go down to the studio. I'm going to take my iPhone, and I sampled each note on a wooden xylophone that's down there that I had when my daughter was done with percussion. I was like, okay, that's going to the studio now. So now there's a xylophone down there. And I just like sampled them all. And then I took them in and I loaded them all into Kontakt and created my own sample instrument, put some cool delays on it. And I ended up writing a song that I got it's like a sketch state still, but it turned out to be one of the coolest songs I came up with.
That's
reminded me of a Talking Heads track or something from the late 70s, early 80s. And that stuff's just super fun, It's fun to have tools like that where it's like you've got both the instant writing if you want it, but you can go super deep with it and be like incredibly original with your sounds if you want to.
Yep.
I want to circle back to the writing topic because if you want to, if you love talking about writing, I really enjoy that stuff.
It's better than writing about talking.
It's better than writing. It's better than dancing about architecture.
Yeah.
For each of us, whatever our instrument is, whatever our style of music is, I think that at a core, we all go through the process of like initial idea, making that idea feel like it's a good one and it's got traction, and then taking that to the next level in the studio and following through with it. And one of the things I actually discovered a lot of things just by using Spire Studio. And one of them was allowing myself to put down a guitar idea first. So for example, in my situation, I was practicing a lot of what we call poetry scores. So somebody sent me a poem and then I'm like, all right, I'm going to turn this into a song. And I would put down a guitar idea first. Maybe there'd be an initial idea against one part of the poem for a lyric, but I put down the guitar and then I'd be like, all right, I'm just going to sing over that. And I'd allow myself to do a first vocal pass wherever the melody went, whatever like my first idea was. I tried to let that be, I tried to really respect that because I think there's something to be said for the very first idea you have versus overthinking it, And I found that it's remarkable if you take a first idea and you're like, yeah, that's good, but it's like kind of a mess, and then you maybe re-sing it following that same melody. And then the moment you double it, I don't know if you've ever experienced this, but it's like when you double a vocal, all of a sudden it goes from, just an idea to like, oh man, that's really cool. And like, boy, that singer must have really known what they were talking about when they came up with that idea. Have you found that?
Yeah.
Do you double vocals sometimes to like lock in an idea, or have you found some part of your creative process where if you just do this one thing, it sort of transforms it from just a whatever idea to, wow, there was a lot of intention with that idea?
I know exactly what you mean with the doubling thing. And I think it's because it evokes a lot of our favorite music. Like for me, it evokes like Elliott Smith. I grew up listening to a ton of Elliott Smith. So like the minute I hear that doubled vocal, there's probably some subconscious thing in my head that's like, whoa, you sound just like that Elliott Smith song. Or like, because so much of it is like the music that really blows our minds. The music that like gives you goosebumps every time you listen to it and just does that thing that nothing else in the world can do. The thing that makes you say, that's what I want to do. I want to create music that makes other people feel the way that music makes me feel. Like it's that thing. I want to do that thing. So when you create something that's sort of evocative of that music that affects you, it's inspiring. That little light goes off like, oh, I'm on the right path. So like doubling your vocal, it instantly reminds you of, whatever. Maybe it's Elliott Smith, maybe it's John Lennon, maybe it's whoever.
Yeah. John Lennon, who hated to double his vocals.
I'm sure that's part of it.
I wonder if it's also just the simple act of disguising ourselves a little bit, because I do think that is probably a core thing. Like,
Yes,
in the same way that
definitely.
writing something and then forgetting that you wrote it, so now you're just impersonating this mystery writer. It's like a disguising ourselves. It really is removing ourselves from ourselves. Like, we are our own obstacle, and like all the ways that you can just not own it so that you can re-own it. Really does help.
There's probably some like insecurity that's like, I mean, every human being has to have some insecurity.
Wait,
like,
you're insecure? I'm never insecure. Never.
Just constantly. Only all the time. There's something about, hearing your own voice that's the same way it is when you're talking, or it's the same thing you've heard in your head your entire life. So when you hear that on the track, maybe there's something in your head that's like, oh, it's just me. It's nothing. It's just, boring old me. So the minute you can dress it up and it sounds different, it's like, oh, wait, well, now this is exciting, where it's dangerous. I have to stop myself from doubling all the time, because for some reason, I think because of all those reasons, I always want to do it. But to other people, it probably oftentimes sounds better without it.
What do songwriters, music producers, DJs, EDM, TV, and film composers all have in common with you and me? We all need incredibly cool sounds that instantly transport the music we are creating to the style that we want. This is why Native Instruments is your ultimate toolkit with a massive library of sounds for your studio. Whether you want to create hip-hop, indie pop, classic rock, meditation music, pumping dance floor beats, or full orchestral arrangements, Native Instruments' complete bundle offers you everything you need, from drums, loops, and beats to wild synths, ultra-realistic strings, and vintage electric bass, guitars, and keys. The list goes on and on. I personally love recording real bands in my studio and then adding cool drum samples, synths, and futuristic keys from Battery, Contact, Massive X, Guitar Rig, and Hybrid keys, for example. Plus, it's a great way to make your productions sound modern and unique. Use the code ROCK10 to get 10% off, or get Complete Start for free today with a bundle of 2,000 sounds and 6 gigs of samples over at nativeinstruments.com. Well, this, it's interesting because doubling a vocal, I think it is really good for us to remember that layers, adding more layers, vocals, doubling them, or if we're doing harmonies, I think the Beach Boys, I remember somebody once told me they did like 6 layers of every single note they did. Those can create an amazing result, or they can actually take our production a little too far and we lose something. So, on your records, there is a quality to your voice which is really evocative. There's a storyteller in your records, Dave, that I think could get stepped on possibly if you doubled a vocal. Is that sort of what you're thinking when you think about that?
Yeah, either me or someone else. I mean, sometimes it's other people. Like on the last album I made, the one called Cuts, it was the guy who mixed it is Chris Shaw, and he's an amazing mix engineer.
Yeah,
and
he's great.
I had a lot of stuff a certain way when I sent it to him. And I'll never forget, because I was really excited to have him mix it. He mixes all of Bob Dylan's records. I mean, he's like a really great, amazing, brilliant mix engineer. So I was really excited to hear. I can't wait to hear how my stuff sounds, having him work on it. Now, never forget, I got the first 1 or 2 tracks back from him, and he's like, "Oh, what do you think?" And I played it, and I was like, "Oh no, what am I gonna do?" Like, my first reaction is like, "This just doesn't sound good." I was like, "How is this possible? Like, what is going on?" Because it just sounded so different from what I was imagining and what I was used to, and what. So I was like, what am I going to say to him? Oh God, this is so disappointing. And
I know
was like,
that
well,
experience and that feeling, and it's a real challenge.
so I was like, let me sleep on it. Let me just sleep on it and I'll call him tomorrow. And in the morning, I played it again. And I was like, is there any chance that maybe the brilliant Grammy winning mix engineer knows what he's doing here? Like maybe maybe I should listen again with more of an open mind, which is really hard to do.
Yeah.
And so I had to really, really try. It's kind of like letting yourself fall or something. Like there's certain things that are hard to do. But I really had to try to imagine, to listen to it with no biases and just think, okay, imagine you've never heard this before in your life. And like the clouds just parted and like a light went off. And I was like, oh my God, wait, this sounds amazing. And like, of course, in hindsight, I'm like, yeah, big shock. Like he knows what he's doing more than me.
Yeah.
But like, it's hard to separate yourself from when you're that close to it.
It's very difficult to work with other people. And I'm glad you brought that up. I've experienced similar stuff. So for example, working with another mixer, same story, working with another engineer as a early production, just working with somebody else playing an instrument in the studio and going through that struggle of learning when to give feedback and when to withhold feedback. So like if it's an instrument, if you brought a guitar player in and they're coming up with something, it can be easy initially to sit there on the talkback and, guide them through every single note. And next thing you know, you've worn everybody out, including yourself and the musician. And you end up with something that, you feel like you sort of had control over, but then it might lay flat in the end, versus learning to bring in a great guitar player and just letting them do their thing and maybe a little bit of guidance here and there, but letting them let their voice come through so that it's got this real genuine quality. And I think, as you point out, it's the same thing with working with a mixer or a mastering engineer. How come they don't call them masterers?
Masterer.
It's easy to say mixer. But, have you found that? It's like the same thing. It's like you just have to sort of give some feedback.
You have to find the right people. You got to find the right people to collaborate with, and you need to trust them, and you need to let go. And it's hard because sometimes these songs or whatever you're making, it's something you feel a real attachment to, and it's sort of like letting it fly out of the nest or whatever. But you got to let it go, and you got to trust. And there's a chance it might not work out, and you got to be okay with that. Because doing everything all by yourself is a guaranteed path to good, not great, unless you're truly a remarkably talented everything, which you're probably not. I mean, even
Prince had engineers.
Oh, exactly. I mean, I think of all the great artists, whether, David Bowie or Bjork or whoever. I mean, like, you name it, like they'll say the same thing. Like, they're part of what makes them so great is they pick the right people to collaborate with.
Yeah.
And some of these great moments on the records, you assume it's all them orchestrating everything, but the reality is the geniuses they surround themselves with are the ones responsible for a lot of the stuff.
Yeah, I think there's huge impact in collaboration. So like in my experience, I've found that things that I collaborate with people on ultimately are better, better end results. And it's a good reminder to understand that really at the core of that is our ability to collaborate with people. So sure, you can make the wrong choice. You could pick the wrong guitar player for your guitar solo on the song. But your ability to train yourself to do more collaboration and learn how to collaborate also gives you that ability to make the right call when it's time to say, thanks for coming in and doing that overdub. That wasn't, I'm going to call Joe tomorrow to come in and replace it. Maybe you don't tell the first guitar player, but I mean, that comes from allowing yourself to grow in your ability to collaborate. And same thing with mixing and stuff like that. I mean, I imagine it would be pretty frustrating to go through multiple mixers. And I know people have done that on records, or even multiple mastering engineers. But I do think that we get the chance to do that because we do have the opportunity to do our own rough mix first. And at least there's two versions of the mix. There's the one we did and then the one that was mixed after that. And, if you're smart, you give your rough mix to the mixer so that at least they know where you were coming from too.
Yeah. Yep. For sure.
Was that part of your experience with Chris? Did you send him roughs that you had done and did they have sort of a doubled vocal take that he singled out?
I think there was a lot of stuff on there that he probably laughed at and immediately he probably just immediately took everything off of whatever I had on it, which I'm very grateful for.
Yeah. Well, that's cool, man. So let's see, what other questions do I want to ask? What have I not asked you about? What have we not talked about yet? You know what I haven't asked you about your studio? Just tell us about you're somebody who has had years in music industry. You're connected and exposed to all the possibilities for a studio. Did you decide yourself to build a big, flashy recording studio as part of your world? Or did you find that a certain version of a home studio is the perfect fit for you because it allows you to, maybe create to a certain level, but then you collaborate with other studios and other people like Chris, for example, to do other aspects of making a record?
Yeah, for me, it was always 100% just all I care about is a good mic. Like I'm just trying to capture stuff and then I'm going to send it off to someone else to mix it. Before it was Chris, it was Paul Coldery, and he's another great mixer. Because I just want to capture the moment and then hand it off to someone else who can make it sound good. Because there's only so many things you can assign your brain to and spend your time thinking about.
So tell us a little bit about some of the moments you'd like to capture in your own studio. Is it primarily the guitar, an acoustic guitar part and your vocal? Is it, do you actually also want to capture drums, or do you want to, record as a 3-piece in your home studio? What are some of the ways that you want to be set up?
I never do drums at home, but that's mostly just because my music is not drum based. A lot of it is it's just like a different vibe, and also like a lot of times the stuff I'm recording are just ideas that I end up doing again in a different environment. So my home,
you might even describe the home studio as a place to sketch or demo the song, and you might continue it in a bigger pro studio or something.
Yeah, exactly. I've just got like a piano, a couple guitars, a bass, a bunch of nice mics, and then all the contact stuff, to like play around with different sounds and just some of it is even just trying to figure out what songs are good and which songs aren't. Like I'll have a bunch of stuff and it's not until I start recording it and playing it that I'm like, you know what? I feel like this one just isn't really meant to be, at least not now. And other ones I might be like on the fence about it, but when I start laying down some tracks and putting in some different sounds and things, I start to realize like, oh, wow, I actually wasn't sure about this, but I can see the light. It's not until I start kind of messing around with it that I can kind of get inside the song and see if it has that special thing going on with it. But that's all at home. And in terms of serious recording, there's a place here. Actually, you introduced me to Ryan, who's got a studio here, who really appreciate the introduction because we've been working together and hanging out together. And I've quickly come to realize that that's the best studio in Maine.
Wow.
he's great. He's got so much good stuff over there. The vibe is amazing. He's got a big API board and PMC speakers. And it's really like everything you would ever want in a studio. And just in talking to him, I've kind of realized like, all right, anything I want to do and kind of take it seriously, maybe I'll just book some time with him and go in there. It's just called The Studio. That's the name of the studio.
That's cool. And I love, particularly for me through this podcast, the opening up of my perspective of the world and just how many studios exist around, everywhere. I mean, whether it's a commercial studio that people sort of have an open door website to, or people with just great home studios. But, the idea of being able to be anywhere in the world and record is pretty exciting. And, it's also a good reminder to hear you talk about, Ryan, who owns the studio, and just the process, or Chris mixing, these processes of, we also need to connect with a person, that's an important part of what we do. If we have a good vibe with a person, then we have a good experience.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah. It makes sense because that's what it's all about. That's other people listening to your music are connecting one person to another. So it makes sense that that's the same priority that you value when you're making it too. The only thing is I want to be able to, when I'm messing around at home and just sketching stuff, I have a paranoia that I'm going to capture something really amazing and then not be able to use it. So that's why I'm kind of fixated on like, I just want the right mics and the right pre, and I just want to be able to capture the moment, because you never know. You stumble upon some amazing thing, and then I would probably take it into Ryan's studio and build it out from there. But at least that initial seed, it would be good to be able to preserve it.
Yeah, I think that is smart. And it, for those of us who sing and play a guitar, actually for anybody who's using stuff like Contact, it's almost like cheating, because the very first thing you record is automatically going to be incredibly high quality. It's when you create with sounds in the computer, you're starting out almost at the finish line with sounds sometimes, which is pretty cool. But for vocals and guitars, it doesn't take a lot to you can just have one really great mic pre, and then go in through a good converter, and you're making world-class records, which is pretty exciting.
Exactly.
What about the process of identifying whether the song you'd started with is good enough to continue with in the studio? What have you found about that? Do you bounce it off other people? Do you just sort of trust your gut? How do you know it's not a dog of a song? And I say that,
trust my gut.
I say that as a dog lover.
Yeah, I think I actually think that's one thing that I think I'm good at is knowing which ones of my own songs are good and which ones aren't. Because I go through, I'll write songs for years, for like 3 years or 4 before feeling like I'm ready to go to make an album. And it's because I'll, over the course of years, write songs that I just don't think are good enough.
Is it the lyrics?
It's just like everything. It's just like everything about it. I'm just like, you know what? It's good. It's just not great. Yeah. And then certain things I think are great. And that's with the asterisk of like, it's great in my opinion. There might be 12 people in the world who agree with me, but like, I couldn't care less about, if I'm just making records for a handful of my friends, that's cool. Like, I'm not like, I just like making stuff, and I like making stuff that I'm proud of. And I have no control over what anyone else thinks. And I'm also like not in a position in my life to be out like promoting it like crazy or touring or any of that stuff. So like, you know, for all I know, there's only a dozen people in the world who ever would possibly care about any of these songs that I make. But even if that were true, I'm like, well, that's cool. So then I'm going to make records for those 12 people. And that's my little audience. And that's awesome. But
so Rockstars, make sure you go listen right now. We're going to double that number before you know, before
I will make another 4.5 cents from Spotify.
Yeah. No, I think it's core that you have to love doing this, and you have to, you know, the love of making music has to be what drives us. And I mean, you know, that's actually pretty good. It's like if I'm eating, I got a place to live and life feels all right, and I've got my health, but I'm also loving making the music I do, then I'm not sure what else I really would want. You know, I mean, that's certainly loving making music is what got me started.
Yes. It's the same with food. Like, you might be really proud of a meal that you cook, and it doesn't mean you're like basing some kind of idea of success on how many other people taste that food and feel the same way or something. You know, you're like, you just made a great meal and enjoyed it, or like for yourself or your family or whatever. I kind of feel the same way about making music. Like, it's just like, I make music that I would like to eat.
Yeah. I will add to that though, and say the collaborative experience, like the group experience of enjoying music, is pretty important. I mean, I do enjoy stuff just by myself, but I really enjoy stuff when me and my friends who made the music are sitting around enjoying it. That is a great experience, you know? I mean, like the bonding aspect of being in a band, having friends and creating together is worth a lot to me. And
it's such an important thing. And I wish I had more of it. For me, it's that group on the island every June.
Yeah.
It's really, and I say this to them all the time, and they always like roll their eyes at me because I've said it so many times. Everyone's sick of hearing it, but I
love you guys.
Pretty much. But they're like, we're a band, you know, there's a group of us. It feels like we're like a little wrecking crew, because it's like, there's like 13 or 14 of us who have been doing this now for over a decade. And it's such a special, unique thing that we do together. And we know each other so well musically. We can all like really read each other's minds in terms of how we play and how we write and who's doing what when we all play together. That, you know, I don't know if anyone else has really developed musically in this strange way that we have together, but it's the kind of thing that takes a good 10 plus years to develop, and we've done it. So it feels like we're just this unique band.
Do you ever feel like the time that you've spent watching YouTube videos, trying out mix tricks, and tweaking version after version of your mixes has gotten you nowhere? Have you been looking for a simple, straightforward, step-by-step process for creating a pro mix that won't take you years to learn? What if you could have a Grammy-winning mix engineer who understood all your mixing struggles and could coach you through them? If you struggle with any of these questions, then the Ultimate Mixing Masterclass is just for you. Now you can discover the proven step-by-step mix system from Grammy-winning mixer Craig Alvin for consistently creating a pro-quality mix from your home studio that will sound amazing everywhere. Listen to this quote from one of our students, David. Quote, "Absolutely the most informative and helpful block of information and mentoring on the mix process that I've ever been a part of. That was like sitting behind a mix engineer for years, watching and picking up tips along the way, but condensed into a 6 to 7 hour session, close quote. Look, I'm so confident that this will take your mixes to the next level that if you can't get a killer mix within 30 days, I'll give you a full refund, no questions asked. So if you're ready to take your mixes to Grammy-winning quality, then go to ultimatemixingmasterclass.com and start now by checking out the free preview of the ultimate snare mixing trick. And I'll see you at the front row table of the Grammys. Cheers. So in that reminds me of the topic of, while old friends that we make music with can be so rewarding, sometimes I feel stuck by that too, because sometimes our old friends aren't always available, and I've found myself living in a different city and then thinking like, geez, I really wish I had started a band here or something like that. So let me make that a pivot to talk about some of the other people you work with too, which maybe were new writing experiences. You've done stuff with Adam Duritz, Lianne LaHavas, and Gene Ween. What stories would you want to share about some of those collaborative writing experiences? And how is that similar or different from writing with an island full of old friends?
Well, that would be a great band, first of all. Those three. Adam Duritz is the singer of Counting Crows. And that's, in a weird way, he's kind of like one of the people responsible for me really taking music seriously. Because I had recorded some songs and he somehow came across them. Because I put them out just like on the internet. And I got an email one day that was just like, hey man, I really like your songs. We should connect sometime, and it was signed Adam Duritz. And I was like, I just wrote back, like, are you the guy from Counting Crows? And he was like, yeah. And we were both
are you the guy that hacked his email?
Exactly. And, I wasn't expecting someone like that to just sort of stumble across my music. So it was kind of weird. And we ended up becoming friends, and we were both living in New York at the time. And he really encouraged me to do more. And it's amazing how much a little confidence can do.
Yeah.
Because prior to that, I don't know. I guess I wasn't sure if there was any point in me doing this other than, I don't know. I just was, I didn't have much confidence. And it's cool when someone like that compliments you and, someone who's been successful in it for a long time. And you're like, wow, well, that's cool. Maybe I am good at this. Or like maybe if he likes it, maybe there's other people who would like it too. And therefore, maybe I should actually do this. So that was cool.
Did he have, I seem to recall that he had a label. I remember crossing paths with him through another artist. I didn't communicate with him directly, but I was working with an artist here named Nielsen Hubbard back in the late 90s. And I seem to remember that Adam's imprint label or something was who we were recording that stuff
interesting.
For.
I don't know. No, I'm not sure. It's a good question.
Yeah. Well, anyway, okay. So what was it like to co-write with him, and how did you guys come up with that plan?
We didn't really. He only sang on my records. We never wrote together.
Okay.
He just sang and did some arranging on a couple songs of mine on the album Pre-Gret. But it was interesting because then I'm just remembering actually just now for the first time that there was a point several years later where he made a record and he wasn't feeling totally self-confident. And I remember sitting in his apartment talking to him about his songs and like what I thought was unique and valuable and interesting about this batch of songs he had made. And he hadn't really thought about it that way. And he kind of saw the light and was feeling confident about his record that he ended up releasing. Because I remember he was, talking about that in other interviews, kind of like this. So it was kind of cool to be able to in some way kind of repay the favor.
Yeah, so Making It Up As I Go and Name Game, I think those were a couple of the tracks you guys did together. Is that correct?
Yep.
So
And then,
did you work on the music together in the same space, or was this a sort of a remote collaboration?
he just came into the studio when I was making the album, and he came up with all the harmonies and just sang on it and hung out.
That's great. Now, what about working with Gene Ween? So Ween, I mean, they crossed my radar many years ago and had just made these really cool, I think they were done on 4 tracks.
Yeah, the original Ween records.
Yeah.
I mean, I was definitely a fan of the band initially simply because they're the best band of all time. I mean, but for real though, they're so good, and they're just so weird and interesting. I mean, there truly is no one else like them. I remember just being like, what is the deal with these guys? But the music was just so amazing, and they had so many different great songs that they all sounded completely different.
What was that first record? Was it Chocolate? It probably wasn't even the first record.
I forget that. No, Chocolate and Cheese came later. There was one called God, Ween, Satan.
No, right.
That may have been the first one.
And it was almost like I'm just sort of riffing here, but I think of them as almost as if Guided by Voices was Cake and did a 4-track record. You know, it was a little bit more precise and you know,
they just really love music a lot. They just really love a lot of different kinds of music. Like they will equally obsess over Stevie Wonder as they will about Motorhead, as they will about Townes Van Zandt, as they will about Prince. So when they're writing songs, they're kind of writing in the style of those who they're inspired by. And it was the best piece of advice I ever got about making music and being creative was from him. And he said that they had a thing they called the 50-50 rule, which was when you've got a song, and if you go as far as humanly possible in the direction it kind of naturally wants to go in, just lean into it and take it just ridiculously far in that direction. There's a 50-50 chance it'll be the best thing ever or the worst thing ever. And so if you're playing a song and you're like, this is kind of like a Motorhead kind of vibe, it's like, well, then just go crazy making it like a pure Motorhead song. And then this other song, you're like, this kind of sounds almost like a cowboy Western ballad thing. It's like, okay, well then do the like hoof beats cowboy a cappella. So, you know, and you're like, but wait, we can't do that. That's like a completely different genre that has nothing. It's like, no, we can and we will. Like, go ahead and just let the song be whatever it wants to be and take it as far in that direction as you possibly can.
That's what I remember is that they did a record called 12 Golden Country Greats where I think they came to Nashville, and I think they did it in Nashville, and they just tracked a bunch of country songs, and it was like a whole new direction.
They did. And they actually,
I mean, that sounds like a lot of fun as an artist to do that kind of stuff.
They had a lot of very offensive lyrical content. And when they made that record, they came to Nashville and got like all the best players, like all the best session guys who played with, you know, all the sort of good old boy country classics, who were like, you know, very square, polite, always, you know, minding their manners. And so when they played them the songs, they took off the vocal track. And so all these guys played on the record just playing instrumentals. So all those songs, they had no idea what the words were or anything. So they got all these guys to play on it. And then I think a lot of them were really pissed when they heard the record came out with all these lyrics that were all over it. Like,
oh no.
Yeah. Well,
I'm looking at some of the players on it. Buddy Spiker, Pig Robbins on piano. Buddy played fiddle and mandolin. Charlie McCoy. These are all like old school members of Area Code 615, and the super group session players going all the way back to the 70s and stuff, and maybe even earlier than that. But and the Jordanaires on vocals, amazing.
Yeah. And then if you go and listen to the album, the lyrics might surprise you, and it certainly surprised them.
I hope so, man. I like lyrics that surprise me. I feared.
We started working together when I signed Ween to Rounder Records.
Oh, cool.
And that's kind of how we first met. And we did a record together that I A&R'd called La Cucaracha, which was the final Ween record. And it was kind of a long story, but he had a bunch of health problems and some issues with substance abuse, and went through pretty intensive rehab. And when he came out of it, it was kind of like, well, the good news is I'm alive. The bad news is I'll definitely never write or play music again.
Wow.
Like there's just no possible way, and that's okay. And I'm just going to move on. And so I started managing him and kind of just helping him get his sea legs back under him, getting comfortable writing sober, and kind of also just convincing him that this music is inside him. He doesn't need the drugs or the booze to get it out. So we were just getting him comfortable playing music and writing music. So we ended up writing and recording a whole album together, which came out as his debut solo album.
Wow.
And
what's that one called?
It's called Freeman.
Spot. I can't remember the name of anything I do.
Oh no, it's called Freeman. That's his last. So his real name is Aaron Freeman. And the album is just called Freeman, all capital letters, kind of like nice. Free man.
Sort of fitting name for this new sober way of doing stuff too.
Yeah, exactly.
Freed. Well, and that, just hearing you talk about that, it reminds me of this other things we talked about. So like that becomes, it's like having a new island to go right to. It's like having to find new friends that aren't your old friends and start doing it in that process of, except, in your case, you were an old friend or are, and getting into this new comfort zone, doing it enough until it becomes familiar again, and then let the creative stuff just come through.
Yeah. And I think it worked out because it, he built up a lot of confidence and got playing again, and we put the record out, and there was a whole tour, and then he was able to get Ween, because at that point Ween had broken up. And after that, he was kind of able to wrap his head around getting Ween back together. And so they got back together, and now, I'm happy to see that Ween is back to being a badass, amazing touring rock band again.
That's
playing
great, man.
festivals and stuff.
What a feather in your cap there to have been part of that and help bring that. The first song on Freeman on the album that you guys did, I think was it called For a While I Couldn't Play My Guitar, and then it actually cut off the rest of the.
Oh yes, it's not the first song on the album, but it's called For a While I Couldn't Play My Guitar Like a Man.
Oh, there you go. It's a way to go, helping somebody pick up their guitar and play it the way they want again.
Yeah.
This podcast is proud to present Recording Studio Rockstars Academy. Are you ready to take your recording, mixing, and mastering to the next level and make your best record ever? Then visit the Academy to find the course that's right for you. Want to record killer drums in your home studio? Then check out Rockstars of Drums to learn how to record, edit, and mix pro-sounding drums with a professional Nashville session drummer in a Grammy-winning studio. Or if you're ready to start mastering your own records at home, then check out Rockstars of Mastering, where I walk you through exactly how I master my own records using nothing but plugins. Plus, I take you into a world-class mastering studio, Sterling Sound, to meet with Ryan Smith and hear how he professionally mastered my record, Skadoosh, for release to streaming platforms. That's the music you hear on this podcast, Rockstars. And if mixing is your focus, then check out my free mixing course, Mix Master Bundle, where I show you how to mix using stock and free plugins in Pro Tools. Plus, you get a look at how I recorded everything in my studio and multi-track downloads for you to practice mixing and even upload to your website if you want. Are you ready to make your best record ever? Then go to recordingstudiorockstars.com/academy to get started now. Well, that's pretty amazing, man. So let's see. I know we're running out on time here. One of the things we didn't even mention, we didn't talk much about yet, was Plugin Alliance. Was that are there certain? See, it's interesting to hear you talk about it because you've really narrowed down your creative space to being what you need for the creative stuff. Plugin Alliance has some incredible plugins in there. Have you found some of those to be really useful in your own process? I know you probably focused on the writing aspect. Maybe you don't get as ninja and deep into all the tech stuff of all the software tools, but what in the places like iZotope or Plugin Alliance have you found some really favorite stuff?
Well, for Plugin Alliance, there's a lot of stuff. I mean, there's that's just true. I can just put a period at the end of that. Yeah, there's a lot of stuff.
Yeah.
But the Oven is a really cool kind of saturation type of plugin, but it's also a lot more than that. All the Brainwork stuff is amazing.
Yep.
Like the metering tool and the limiter and the clipper and there's all the Brainwork stuff is crazy. All the emulation of like the SSL stuff.
Yeah.
That there's a few different SSLs in there that are, it's kind of crazy how good they are. I mean, obviously a lot of us don't have the time or the money or the space or anything to buy all the actual gear that this stuff is emulating. But, it used to be that it was like, well, the plugin emulation can't even come close to the real thing.
Yeah.
But, the fact is that's not true anymore.
So in your experience, as somebody who maybe is starting with acoustic guitar and vocals, it's interesting to hear you bring up like the Oven, for example, which is a really cool saturation plugin. It's a fascinating, I mean, it's like, it's some really minutia mastering kind of stuff, although I think it does extreme stuff too. But it just reminds me that you might find that a lot of the tools that really turn you on are ones that enhance like subtle warmth and saturation in a vocal and a finger-picked guitar and stuff. Is that accurate or fair to say?
Well, kind of, but I like playing around with them just to play around with them.
Yeah.
And just to see how they work. When it comes to actually using them, like on my own music, I just trust other people more than myself. So I
like when you're at the engineering or mixing stage.
Yeah.
Or that kind of stuff, yeah.
I just don't trust myself. They're like weapons that I don't trust myself with. Or like, to use the food analogy again, it's like I just would end up putting way too much salt on everything if it were up to me. So I'm able to be like, wow, that salt is really delicious. But like, I'm going to let someone else, season the food.
Yeah. Have you messed with the Oberhausen synth?
No,
the BX.
I haven't.
The OBX. Yeah, that one is really cool. That's a lot of fun. Some
There's
of the
so
ones,
many things. There's like hundreds of things.
I know. There's so much stuff. Some of the ones, I'll just give a shout out to some that have become my recent favorites. I've been doing a ton of mixing using the Townhouse compressor. Now, I love the way that sounds. And in fact, it was John Fennell who I was mixing a record with up at Relay Recording in Columbus, Ohio. And he was using it on one of our records. And I was like, man, that sounds great. So been messing with that. That one's a lot of fun. The that BX console, AMEC 9099. I like that one a lot.
Yeah.
I mean, they're all great, but for some reason I just was messing with that, and that's a lot of fun to dial in sounds with that.
I mean, some of those ones are like the BX console and the J9000, the SSL one. Like those are ones where like ultimately I just trust what other people tell me even more than anything else. Like, because I'll hear it and be like, yeah, it sounds good, but really what convinces me is like, young guru telling me about how the Plugin Alliance SSL stuff is, he uses it all the time and thinks it's better than anything else. Or like, and he's Jay-Z's engineer. Or like Laura Sisk talking about the Brainworks stuff and going on and on about it. Like, she's Taylor Swift's engineer and she's talking about how that's her go-to stuff. So like when I hear that when I hear them tell me that stuff, I'm just kind of like, I could spend all day going through it myself, but it makes a lot more sense for me to just be like, I trust you guys.
Yeah. And I want to give a shout out to another company that I've been looking at. I haven't actually used it yet, but Maddie Harris has done some great videos on it. It's a company called Rock Solid Audio, and they make a great little controller that does a channel strip, and you can assign it to all the Plugin Alliance plugins. So you could have each console, and if you just take a moment, they probably already exist, the wrappers, but you could have a physical controller on your mixing desk. Micro 4K is one of them, and then I guess that's the one that they've got now, and it's just pretty simple and it seems to work really great. But I do think that using these mixing channel strips and having a physical controller to quickly grab knobs and dial in EQs. I've been doing a lot of that using the UC1, which is the SSL plugin controller, and I use it with the SSL plugins, and it's just such a great experience. So I would encourage anybody rock stars to go check that out. Definitely encourage you to check out Plugin Alliance. Those plugins are amazing. And there's so much stuff. It'll keep you busy for a long while. And then maybe take a look at the Rock Solid Audio controller to pair up with that. I don't know if you guys have a controller on the way, over at Native Instruments or Plugin Alliance, but I think that's a lot of fun when you can it's like the complete S61, just the ability to turn knobs.
Yeah.
And
get in a physical space. Yeah. Make it a physical experience.
I think an ice cream truck just pulled up in front of my house. I hear it in the background there. I don't know if you will.
It's like our outro music.
Yeah, exactly. So speaking of outros, let me go to our closing question, Dave. I like to ask this of all our guests, especially when there's an ice cream truck right outside my window. And we're going to take the Wayback Machine, and you get to go back in time and find young Dave, who's, maybe you just discovered your major third on the piano and you're thinking, one day I want to be making hit records. And you say, look, I've come back to give you this one bit of advice, young Dave. Here's the single most important thing you need to know to be a rock star of the studio yourself one day. What advice would you like to go and give yourself if you could?
Oof. Let's see.
Move to Maine, young Dave. Oh, you're already in Maine.
Well, one piece of advice would be a piece of advice that someone gave me that I really appreciated, which was to not underestimate the value of relationships, which sounds like it could be a cliche kind of catch-all thing, but not everyone thinks that way. I remember specifically, it was my friend Jim Horan at Rounder Records. I can't remember what was going on, but something was going on with the band Delta Spirit that I signed to Rounder. And there was some sort of conflict, and the two sides of the conflict were the band on one side and the label on the other. And I was talking to Jim about it, and he was like, you have a really special relationship with those guys. Because I was like, what do I do? I want to be like, I want to I want to be faithful and allegiant to the band, but I also work for the company. And he was just like, you got to just you got to maintain the relationship. It's not worth damaging your relationship with these guys because of this one little thing. And I remember him just talking a lot about how like ultimately the relationships are like your currency that have the most value than anything else. And not to think about the kind of short-term wins and losses and just think about the long-term relationship. And that I always think about that because it's so true. And I can even look back on like every good thing in my career that's happened. It was always somehow thanks to some kind of real relationship that existed or some real relationship I built with someone that led to the good thing happening.
Yeah. Especially in a world we're surrounded by, digital facsimiles of real life all the time.
Yeah,
and I'm
true.
not talking about those cool samples that you hear in Contact. I'm talking about, social media and like this impression of reality. And the face-to-face stuff is so core and so crucial. It reminds me of something that we talk about sometimes, which is, this thought with when you're starting out, you can really be impacted by your impression of opportunities that count. It's almost like songwriting. It's like, you hear somebody else's voice, you think, well, they're good. You hear your own voice and you think, I don't know, that's just me. But it's same thing with opportunities, right? You see people making records in other genres or things around you and you think, oh, that must be a legitimate career move. I should probably do what they're doing. And you might instinctively discount your group of friends, your core, people that are all just starting out. But I think it's good to hear you remind us to just be encouraged to know that the people we know right now are friends right in college, right in high school even, these people that are close to us, nobody's famous yet, but that might be your biggest opportunity, keep those friends close through your life and career because it can really mean a lot and it can really turn into the best thing you ever did.
Yeah, it's true. And it's more important. Ultimately, those things are more important anyway. Like people who live and die by certain business deals or short-term opportunities without thinking about the human relationships that might help them in the short term, but it never is a good idea in the grand scheme of things. Music is just one part of life.
Yeah, indeed. Well, Dave, it's been a total pleasure hanging out with you, man. Of course, I get to hang out with you more than just this podcast because we chat every once in a while. But what an honor and a pleasure to have you on the show, finally joining us talking about making records. Rockstars, please go listen to Dave's records, which sound amazing. Chris, you killed it with those mixes. You nailed it. and
if anyone has, for anyone who's listened this far into the podcast, I feel like you should call me up and talk to me for 2 hours about yourself now, just to balance it out. So if you're listening, hit me up and tell me about yourself.
Yeah. So where should the Rockstars go if they want to connect with you and learn more about you and your music or just get in touch with you?
Probably just Instagram, typical answer, but it's easy. Right. I'm there. Dave Godowsky.
Dave Godowsky. All right, Rockstars. Thanks for listening. Dave, always a pleasure to hang out with you, man. Thanks for sharing your life story with us.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
All right, man. Talk soon, dude.
Bye.
Cheers. Thanks so much for listening to Recording Studio Rockstars. If you enjoyed the show and want to help make it better, then please share this episode with your friends on social media and leave a rating and review on iTunes to help the podcast reach more rock stars like yourself. You can click directly over to iTunes or go to rsrockstars.com/review for an easy explanation. And remember to hit the subscribe button to keep up with weekly episodes. And if you're ready to make your best record ever now, then head over to Recording Studio Rockstars Academy, where you can start with my free course at mixmasterbundle.com. Thanks so much for listening, and thanks for being a rock star. I'm Lid Shaw, and this is Recording Studio Rockstars. Now, go make great music. Recording Studio Rockstars would like to give a big thank you to our amazing sponsors who help make this episode possible. Lewitt, Grace Design, Adam Audio, Native Instruments, and iZotope. And remember, at iZotope.com and nativeinstruments.com, use the coupon code ROCK10 for 10% off any plugin purchase. If you enjoyed Recording Studio Rockstars, then please check out our sponsors using the links in our show notes below, because it's a great way to help support this show. These are all things I highly recommend for your studio because they're going to help you make your best record ever. I would also like to thank our fantastic team here at Recording Studio Rockstars, Vlad Wasilchenko, Braden Stremming, and Liz Hulitskaya. Thanks so much for listening, Rockstars, and we'll see you in the next episode. Cheers.